Hello YouTube. I'm doing a review on the Spark and what to look at when you're buying it, the accessories, some tips, and some comments. Basically, why would you want to buy a Spark? Well, if you're getting into the drone world, you don't necessarily want to get a product that is too cheap, or you don't want to go overboard and get a product that is too expensive. So the Spark has a very good camera, and personally I thought it was a good place to start. Now, a reason you might want to step up and get the Mavic Air is that there are a couple features like the ability to take pictures in RAW, and also it's sturdier, a little heavier, can fly in the wind a little better, and it has about 5 minutes more flying time. So those are things that might make you lean towards getting something more professional, but if it's always good to start with the Spark, in my opinion, and then move up. The when you get started, what you're going to need to do is go and download the Go4 software, and when you fire it up, you'll run through the updates for it. I selected mode 2 with the remote controls, but if you have been flying helicopters and Xbox, I've heard the mode 3 is good too. Basically, the modes on the remote, which for me is almost a mandatory option because of the flying distance and everything else. But the mode 2 works where this is up and down. Then you can rotate right or left, and the right is basically movement forward, backwards, right, and left. Of course, moving forward, you have some sensors on the front, so if you do run into an obstruction, it will help you out, but you have to be careful moving backwards and sideways. The other things I say is, since we're talking about navigation, and we can talk about the remote, is basically I set the function key to move the gimbal up or down. When I do adjust the gimbal on this button, it's usually a very gradual motion. My custom settings here are basically for the camera settings, and this is your return to home, and this is your sport mode, which it's been a couple weeks since I have it. I haven't really tried it yet. And then this, where you hold your phone to see the display. Now, the settings that I did in GoPro were basically the 30 meters return to home. I set to auto exposure, even though a lot of people recommend to set it to manual, because light does change quickly and it's not very easy to change those settings. I also set the height limit to 60 to 80 meters, but don't set any limit on the distance. I set the fly to home at 20% of battery charge, but it could be set higher, 25 or 30 easily. The white balance I set for sunny or cloudy, and that seems to be fairly stable because you don't want that changing. Now, Uh, I've gotten a lot of accessories and or a fair amount of accessories, and I can tell you which ones I like and which one I don't think are necessary. But for example, this one here, which gives you a longer range theoretically, is optional. Second battery is usually pretty much mandatory because you need it. I got the option so that I could fly more time with it. You always need a couple extra propellers, and it's helpful to have the protective case, but you don't want to forget it left on. I have a shade that also protects the gimbal, and I have a CPL filter which helps, especially in bright light, and some ND filters when the light is really bright. I have the prop. It holds the propellers in place, and I have a nice bag that carries everything together, which is good for storage or for travel. And of course you need a memory card, say 32 gigabytes. And there's the optional goggles, which are fairly heavy, but in bright light it's very hard to see the display. But using the goggles is a fairly advanced feature because you're totally immersed and you can get disoriented. And there are a lot of limitations on the goggles with the Spark. I'm not sure with the Mavic if that's different, but basically, apparently you can't run the display, let's say an iPhone or an iPad, and the goggles at the same time. I run them just with the goggles or just with the phone. But the touchscreen and features on the goggles are fairly limited compared to the Go 4, and in my case I've never been able to run them simultaneously, and you lose a lot of features like the Go Home in the Go 4 settings. I have not tried it here, but I do not think it works if you can't run them simultaneously. Now, as far as battery charging goes, the batteries take, I'd say everything takes about an hour plus or minus, but the remote control lasts for 2 to 3 hours. The batteries only last for 10 or 15 minutes. The goggles last for 4 to 5 hours. So it's the main concern is, of course, charging your batteries all the time, because that has to be done almost all the time. Another accessory I want to mention, this, unlike the Maverick where you can unscrew them, or the Mavic, this can go on here for storage, and this helps with the shade, but it doesn't solve all the problems of being out in the light. I mean, obviously you want to turn up your display as bright as possible, but I found there are situations where I can't fly because I can't see. And but back to the goggles. The goggles are great. You can wear glasses in them. You can buy, it's very expensive, but you can buy corrective lenses inside. I bought the optional case that is slightly padded, fairly expensive, but I think it's worth it. It was 20 bucks. And I find it fairly heavy, but you know, for flying in bright light, I mean, you almost need to have it because, as I mentioned before, you can't see the display. I mean, it's great for flying, you know, in the afternoon or early morning, but otherwise you're pretty much stuck. The filters are very helpful. Um, the CPL, especially when you're flying high, cuts out a lot of the reflections. And you know, I got the ND filters too. Apparently, when you slow down the film, it looks more realistic and less jagged. And UV filter might be helpful. I think it might obstruct some quality too. So with bright light, I use a CPL, and you can adjust the settings. So other tips, when you're buying it, sometimes the DJI combo is very good. Basically, it includes everything. Beware, there are vendors online that will take out some of the expensive options and sell you something that you'll go out and have to buy. So I suggest going with the DJI combo pack versus the fake sort of essential combo or fly packs that some vendors put together in Amazon. So in general, these are my suggestions. I mean, Spark is a great place to start and a good drone to keep, even if you move up, and it's less obtrusive. You can go to places and people won't feel like you're being intimidating to them. And another sort of a complaint that I have is there are a lot of warnings in the displays that you get, and they're hard to turn off. And I think it's common sense sometimes that basically you don't want to fly in public parks and airports or areas, but in general, I think there's a way to set those warnings off, and I highly suggest it. Another option that I didn't mention is the cables. When you buy the goggles, this cable is almost mandatory. As you see, it connects. I use a charging cord. I think there's another charging cord here to connect it to the remote. And then for my iPhone, I basically have a connector here that goes in, and that's so when you buy the Spark and the remote, you need this, and when you buy the goggles, you need this one. And the other thing I was going to mention, there's some limitations on the goggles with the Spark. Basically, it looks like you can only run it in 720, and if it's set on anything else, it seems like it's not working. So you have to go through the setup procedure again. The sequence with the goggles is to turn this the Spark on, the remote, wait for the green light to come on so you know they're connected, and then turn on and attach the goggles, and do that in reverse when you're shutting it down. But this is sort of my first attempt to communicate what I've learned, and hopefully it helps. If you have any questions, please list them below, and please subscribe to the station if you're interested. So I'll be putting out more videos about drones. My primary interest is photography, music, and other things, and I think the drone sort of fits in. So I'm certainly enjoying it, and hopefully you will too. Thank you for watching.